So we're now going to take a look at a different kind of culture, not culture in the sense that we've been talking about at Arts and Culture, but organizational culture, systemic culture. And Sphinx has put together a fabulous group of people to lead us through this conversation. So please get it together and help me give a warm, warm welcome to Horst Abraham, Sherry Alexander, Vince Paul, and Mark Wallace. Bring them to the stage. All right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's tough to follow the act that we just heard. But let's see what we can do it. I hail from a very, very different world. The world of dog-eat-dog business. And when I speak of culture, I will be speaking of culture in terms of organizational culture, which may or may not be a blend of culture as we've discussed it so far. The reason why I would like to address culture is because of this. I won't go into the detail other than to say most initiatives, most change initiatives, most sales initiatives even, tend to fail. And addressing culture, or the lack of addressing culture, is usually the leading reason why mergers and acquisitions, why organizations fail, because the culture is not aligned with the strategic imperative. The capacity of the organization's culture is unable to deliver on the opportunities or the demands that stand before them. So that, I believe, is a good reason to address culture from a slightly different angle, and I hope you'll bear with me. This is a model that has come into my life in 1992, and that really dates me, but I look old enough to be able to say that. And much like a dog-eared book that you may have found in your journey through life that forever speaks loudly and relevantly to you, or the piece of music that just haunts you and inspires you over and over and over again, this is what inspires me, a two-dimensional symbol of what represents culture in the way it was researched and developed at the University of Michigan. And on the surface, very benign, very inconsequential. But if you allow me to just give you a very speed route through it, it may come alive for you as it has for me, because it allows me to really see the world in its detail as well as in its organizational complexity in whole new different ways. Let's see whether I can accomplish that in very quick fashion. Starting in the upper right corner is green, and I believe if I've ever seen green from an organizational context, it is what we're experiencing here with Sphinx. It is creating a new, exciting, inspiring idea that so far nobody else has been able to copy, and nobody else came up with anything better. This is usually the beginning of an organization, a project that will move the world in its direction. Remaining fairly superficial in the first round, going clockwise, no such idea survives until you somehow can monetize it or you can support it. So the blue is that reptilian part of an organization that needs to somehow figure out a way to fund its great and inspiring idea. Moving quickly on, beyond that, and by the way, the red quadrant at one point almost derailed Apple because they were unable or unwilling during that particular portion in the life cycle of their existence to attend to that dimension of their organization. It's the organization, the hierarchy, the structure, the sequence, the means by which we get things done. And the red quadrant holds everything together and allows us to make yesterday perfect and to perpetuate whatever was successful and move it forward into the future. The upper left corner is who and what makes it all work. That is how you populate the organization. That is whom you choose to be on your team, or, and most organizations don't do a very good job about that, deselect people who are unwilling to come on the journey that unfolds itself in front of the opportunities and the challenges. Double-clicking this same circle again and returning once to green, as an outsider looking into the field of the arts, for a long time have we sort of quivered coming from Vienna, Austria, where music is part of our DNA. I've quivered in my shoes because I saw the arts deteriorate, being taken away out of the limelight, and very worried that it may disappear or shrivel to a level where it began to be insignificant. So as you think of it in the context of your organization that you are part of, is your vision, is what you currently dream enough to keep you relevant? If not, you know what to do. And the relevance will usually manifest itself in how your blue part of the organization shows up. This is all about show me the money. This is all about, are we able to get donors to donate? And we all know about the donor fatigue at this point in this country. So we need to somehow, on the right side of this model here, create a congruence between what we dream and what is actually fundable, monetizable. Because without that, we simply will perish, or we have an overabundance of offerings that simply can't be supported. Going once more to red, and here is already where we begin to realize the title, the competing values. In any organization, there are tensions, natural tensions. If managed properly, productively, will be indeed productive in terms of the organization will be effervescent, it will be progressing in a good direction at the right kind of pace. When you, for instance, look at the diagonal, red to green, there are constant tensions there because red essentially tends to kill green. The bureaucracy of an organization that develops over time, unless you modify how you do things here, will gradually impede your ability to create and be green as part of the complexity that is captured here in this 4-cell matrix. The tension that exists between the blue and yellow is manifested by more and more people burning out, rusting out. The demand is always do more with less. And as long as you deliver the results in responding to that call to action, the demand will only be do even more with less. So we somehow find ourselves in an organization that has 4 disparate and competing dimensions to it. All of them are necessary. But for you as leaders, figuring out how to manage these tensions is everything about what makes you worthy of your paycheck. Right now, I, for instance, see in this room here this morning, I had goose pimples on me. The real work is being done. The real work of innovating, creating the right kind of green, complemented thus with the right kind of blue, and being able to harness it in a way where the red, the bureaucracy, the hierarchy, the rules, the regulations, the processes don't get in the way of staying generative and therefore relevant. On the people side, and this will be my closing comment here, the model should remind us that oftentimes from an organization being started to the time when it reaches its second life cycle, so to say, we still have old populations populating the organization, which oftentimes gets in the way of continuing your journey to relevance, because they tend to want to hold things where they were. And that, of course, requires either deselecting people or re-educating them if it's possible. So the tensions in this matrix here are there and inextinguishable. This, for instance, is a drawn model of an organization that, by the solid lines, pictured itself in the current reality. the dotted line in its desired reality. This, by the way, required at least a year and a half of work to accomplish. To move, for instance, that much more into the green sector, diminishing the amount of blue in the blue sector. And look at the red one, lower left, right now not red but black, but the diminishing. How do we have to redefine the way we work here in order to allow us to achieve that, to move to the upper part of the model and from left to right? So I leave you with the following questions here, because I truly am not sure, having heard some of the conversations, that we know what industry we work in. Who are your competitors? Who competes with a share of wallet? How do you manage culture in your organization? Is there a designated player to do that? What most powerfully defines your culture? And by the way, we witness here a wonderful manifestation of what culture of Sphinx is. And how do you ensure the organization's relevance? Oftentimes buried by just being concerned about how do we show up tomorrow. And both on a personal and on an organizational level, what have you done in the last 2 or 3 years that fundamentally changed the way you show up? That was a turbo course that usually is the content of about a week's worth of work. So I'm curious to see what comes out of the panel and the rest of us. Thank you for listening.
Excellent. So, Sherry, let me sort of begin with a question to you. I mean, essentially, what Horst has framed up for us is that there is this sort of battleship that is our organizational culture when we're working within an organization. And it is sort of the constant that moves forward. And all the times we're trying to innovate on top of that. We're trying to bring in innovation, we're trying to bring in a strategy, we're trying to do something, but not change the battleship. And the battleship is really the collection of people who work there, the talent, the human capital. And this is an area that you are a great expert on. So if an organization culture needs to change, and the people need to change, how do the people who need to change hire the people who need to make the change, right? Because we sort of self-perpetuate as human beings. We have this imperative. So there's a tiny question.
A very tiny question. As you have alluded to, we choose people who are like ourselves, unfortunately. And the most important thing that leaders can do is fight against that tendency to choose people that are exactly like us, to look around the 4 quadrants of the competing values framework and assure that there are populations of people or people that are in each of the quadrants, so that we can draw upon the diversity of the organization to take it forward. And a true talent leader is going to assure that there is someone in all of those quadrants and to give them voice, to make sure those people have ability to do the job, the agility to learn, to do multitasking, to be able to give them a vision. A true leader is going to paint a picture in the mind of all of its people, a true picture that they can see. And as Aaron creates the vision of what the school's going to be, if those faculty can see that vision, then they will follow him. And that's what leaders of your organizations have to do. You as leaders, paint that picture in each and every employee and make it their passion as it is yours. And if they don't have that passion, it's time for them to flourish elsewhere.
It's one of my favorite euphemisms, flourish elsewhere. Aaron, I just want to ask one quick follow-up. Let's take the example of Aaron. He's trying to change the culture of a school. He has a clear vision. His natural tendency is to hire people just like him. That is the correct way to change the culture of a school, or he needs to push himself, push his comfort level, and hire people who are not like him?
He has to ask himself on a daily basis, why am I hiring that person? Just as he said,
right.
Why? Asking the 5 whys, critically important, and make sure that every single hire that he has is going to add to the great fabric of the art school, the performing arts.
Vince, let me turn to you. You run an organization whose job is to sort of constantly change and evolve, right? You're always presenting something new, you're always presenting something different. I should always have a reason to come back to music hall to see something different. How do you create an organizational culture that's always about the innovation, that's always about doing something new?
It begins with the word diversity. So what we do, our mission is to engage all of the diversities that live in Southeast Michigan. So to do that, we need to represent the diversities not only on our board, but also on the staff. So if in fact we have everyone from Latinos to Jewish, to African American, to WASPy, to everybody is a reflection of our community at large. So yes, is there conflict on the 6th floor of the music hall? You bet, because we're all coming from our cultural point of view. But we participate in a core value system. And finding and articulating and reinforcing on a daily basis that common ground of the core mission, it rallies the troops to just work that much harder to understand another person's point of view. Now, we try to do this with the community at large, but you have to walk the walk. So I have a board of 80 members strong that represent the wild spectrum of diversities that live here. So people ask me all the time, how in the world do you get consensus among 80 individuals? And I might add, these are entrepreneurial people in spirit. Strong leadership. I would say that they have to respect the very, very top echelon of that leadership, the chairman. So I have a terrific chairman, but I'm not a wilting flower either. We do articulate in a very strong way that this is a direction and here is why. And the why. If you really stay on point with the why, and those people have that core common ground value that we all share, we tend to get our way. We tend to, we're able to harness all of our energy and our money and our talent, as opposed to let it break us apart.
And let me just do a quick audience poll. How many people have been to Music Hall? For the folks that have not raised their hand, Vince, what are 2 things coming up that they should see?
Tonight, I'll just go tonight. We do over 300 events a year. So tonight is the Bollywood Indian Dance Fusion Competition. Long name, very sold out. And
all right, what are 2 things you can get tickets to that everyone here should see?
But it's millennials.
Right.
I want to point that out. Tonight, millennials occupy the music hall, 1,700 strong. And that's another achievement, because millennials, who can understand a millennial? You put them on your staff, and you learn from them. Who does our social marketing? A millennial. 27 years old, terrific. Will I be able to hold on to her? Who knows? It's a millennial. But, but I have learned as much from her as I hope she's learning from me. And now we work with millennials constantly. Then on Friday would be Shaka Khan, Michael Mindengal. A completely different demographic. You will see many of the same people tonight will be at that show on Friday. When I say many, I mean 30, I mean 40, because that's the crossover, and it goes little by little. It doesn't go in huge chunks. And then we'll move on to the Polish Baltic Orchestra, right? That's who we are. These 3 shows reflect who lives here. It's us, folks. And those folks coming to the Shaka Khan concert are going to walk by the Polish Baltic Orchestra poster. And they might get intrigued by it, but I know that it's filtering in. So if you look at all of the totality from the nightclub on the roof, and my trustee's like, oh, the horror, a nightclub on the roof. Well, that's a demographic, folks. We need to speak their language in order to engage them in the future. So yes, that is their language. But if time-tested, proven ancient mating rituals are still intact, they're going to get married, they're going to have kids, they're going to know that we did a family theater series in that music hall, right? And it will evolve with them, and music hall will evolve as they evolve. So the totality of the programming is really meant to be reflective of who we are and what we can do if we were to all work together.
That's great. Mark, you've got a different kind of cultural challenge, right? In our industrial cities, we've spent the past 100 years, 150 years teaching people to avoid the river, to avoid the waterfront, right? We've put factories on it, we've put highways next to it, we've done everything we can to disconnect people from waterfront and from rivers in our cities. You're trying to reconnect Detroit with its riverfront. How do you begin to change the culture of a city about rediscovering and reconnecting with one of its own assets?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned highways. At one point in time, the Detroit River was actually declared a national highway, which sort of underscores how we thought of our physical asset. We looked at it as a place where you move goods and services around. It was not a natural feature. It was not a gathering place. As an organization, the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy has always been focused on connecting people to that location. But getting back to the topic at hand, it's interesting to hear hiring people who are like me. What does that mean? I just sort of want to unpack that question, because like me could mean a number of different things. And I think from an organizational perspective, like me for the riverfront means a person of integrity. It means a person who values diversity. It means a person who's willing to partner. And those are really the things that make us able to leverage the resource that we have. The Riverfront Conservancy, our mission has always been to produce a clean, safe, beautiful, world-class gathering place for all. And that clean, safe, beautiful is it's our minimum promise. That's what we have to do to welcome families and kids to this place, which was previously very dangerous and very industrial. The world-class gathering place is our aspiration. We want to be able to stand up next to any waterfront in the whole globe and say, Detroit is a place where we can be proud. We've done something here that's very special. But what really makes us special in the context of Detroit today is that we are that gathering place for all. And Detroit is huge, which I think everyone knows and appreciates. That's one of our central characteristics as a community. Is we're vast. We lack a lot of public transit, and we also have a lot of folks who are very isolated geographically. So having a place like the riverfront where everyone feels welcome and everyone feels proud of this city is really important. If you go throughout Detroit today, you'll see a lot of neighborhoods where there's just one kind of person, whether it's Harbor Town, where it's sort of middle class folks, whether it's one of the neighborhoods where it's predominantly African American, or Mexican Town where it's predominantly Mexican. The riverfront has really escaped that issue that we have in our community of different groups being dispersed. It's really a place where everyone feels welcome. And I think that goes back to a lot of things that have been mentioned. Our hiring, we have about 90% of our staff is Detroit residents. And we really try to reflect the community in everything that we do.
That's great. All right, we're going to come to the audience in a second, so get your questions ready. We've been spending a lot of time talking about the symphony orchestra, right? Organization 150 years strong of building an organizational culture. And we're at a moment when we want to change that organizational culture. I'd love each of you to think about one piece of advice, one or two sentences of advice that you would give to a symphony orchestra that wants to change its culture, its organizational culture. Everyone else get their questions ready, their comments ready, think about the mics. Horace, let's start with you. Symphony orchestra wants to change its culture.
3 words, if I may. Protect the dissident.
Protect the dissident. Love that. Sherry?
As I said earlier, that you have to have inclusive, lots of different ideas to bring that new vision to fruition, but the leader has to bring it all together into a picture in the minds of all of the people. And if you don't get 60% of the team, the ensemble, the orchestra, seeing that vision, you will not, in fact, be able to change, because we know from all change projects that you need 60%.
60%, the magic number. Vince.
I don't have a magic number, but I remember being moved, or it provoked thoughts and clarity. What does Mozart mean to an inner city child? And I pondered that, and I was able to find common values amongst most everybody that I ever met. And so if that can really be defined and harnessed, I think that the organization can move with the times if they are really in tune with the boots on the ground culture of their environment. Know your surroundings.
Mark.
It's a great question. I think a lot of cultural institutions think of themselves as having to certainly maintain the level of quality and integrity that they expect of themselves. And that's sort of, again, going to that minimum, who do we hire who is like us? I think that's like us, that could fit in that like us category across any discipline and across any area. One of the things we've done as an organization is we have shifted away from thinking about the Riverfront Conservancy as the organization that produces the content, and shifted to thinking about ourselves as a place that convenes or hosts other people's content. And I think every organization can think about that, and in some it'll be easier than others. But we have 14 people on our staff. We have 3.5 miles of riverfront, and we have 5 different parks, one of which is 22 acres, one of which has a water park and a splash pad. We have a reading program, and we have all these amazing spaces, and 14 people, including 3 who work in our accounting department, who are not going to be out there getting kids to play around in the sand. So what we've done is we've shifted our thinking from we have to be doing everything, and we have to take the financial risk, we have to do all the logistics and all the setup, to we're a place that's going to say yes if other people bring their authentic fill in the blank. So other people want to bring some sort of artistic expression to the riverfront. We're going to try to say yes. We've always done walks and runs. That's sort of an easy thing that we've said yes to for a decade, but we're trying to push that envelope and be a place where other people can bring their group or their authentic thing to us. And I think the Symphony has such great physical assets and such a great location in our community, and also such a great network of people, that if they can be a place that drops those barriers and says, yes, bring your program to us. I saw a flyer, I think, the other day for a Flex at the Max. It's brilliant. Let's do yoga on the stage of the DSO. How cool is that? And I'm guessing it wasn't somebody from the Symphony. I don't know. I'm conjecturing right now, but I'm guessing it wasn't somebody from the Symphony who said, I want to learn how to do yoga, and then I'm going to bring yoga here. I'm guessing someone from the community said this would be kind of a cool idea, and they brought their program and their people and their network. So are there ways that you can plug into other people's momentum, other people's authentic expression, and bring it to your space, bring it to your team, and bring it to your location?
That's great. Horace, while we're waiting for folks to sort of get their thoughts together, a lot of times we sort of feel like the stakes are very high when we're trying to change these large, long-serving cultural institutions. It's very risky, it's very dangerous. You've managed to achieve change with the US military, with special forces, right? You've worked in a lot of truly high-stakes areas. How did you begin that? What was the first thing that you had to do to begin shifting a literal battleship?
I think all relevant change starts with knowing what results you want.
Right.
And that transcends the situation, organizations, or any situation really. And being very, very sharply, laser-like sharply focused when that determination is made. What is the result we want to generate? From then on, it is really banking on the collective IQ, really calling upon the people who have actually the contact with reality, and they need to create the new reality. And by bringing those factions together, you will invent the future. In that context, leadership is not an issue of skill, but it is an issue of moral courage to do the right thing. many leaders that we're currently watching in the limelight don't have that courage to do the right thing. So, you know, it may be a long story, but that's what I would like to offer in answer to your question.
Leadership is courage. I love that. Please join us.
Hi, my name is Lara Davis, and I'm from Seattle. And I used to be the program director at a nonprofit organization. And when we spent a number of years going through organizational development, that was really galvanizing for staff and board and for our teaching artist community. And so it strikes me that we're having a conversation about organizational development, and we haven't at all talked about dismantling racism or oppression, doing that internal reflection around privilege and how those things are manifested within our organizations. We talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, but part of the work of attracting and retaining communities of color is doing that work internally to investigate where we might have biases, where we might be perpetuating things that don't make it accessible for people. So I'd love to just hear about the ways in which the work of anti-racism organizational development or that kind of work internally is happening within any of your organizations or within your experience. Thank you.
I mean, one of the things that's so powerful about that question is you need leadership and you need to be results oriented. And how do you solve a problem that you don't know you have? How do you bring that self-awareness? How do you begin getting that outsider view, someone to reflect yourself back to you, warts and all, in ways? I'll throw that to any of you guys. Share it.
I wanted to respond to you because I'm pretty pleased to see what's just recently in the last 9 months started at the university itself, in that we have been given a vision that in fact all of us, I hope all of us, are relating to. Each school has put together an inclusion and diversity plan within the university. There are 94 plans that have been worked on, and they are now being integrated into one plan for the entire school under the new presidency of the new President Schlissel in Ann Arbor. So bringing that together and having people go to town halls, having people in the university, faculty and staff, work together to figure out what biases exist and what are the manifestations of those biases and how are we going to break them down. I'm pretty proud and pleased to be part of that.
Thank you. Vince, did you?
Well, we use a term at the music hall that in order to work at the music hall, you need to be culturally bilingual or trilingual. We say, well, you're going to set the table appropriate to who's coming over. So I know that if it's going to be an African-American predominant audience, we're going to have a menu that is reflective of that down in the cafe. Everyone really understands culturally that you need to be accommodating, and you need to really understand everyone who's coming over so that you understand what makes them feel like they're at home. And so there's many different cultural languages, if you will, that exist on the planet. There's many different cultural languages that exist here in Southeast Michigan. But the idea is that the music hall is located in the mixing bowl in a city center where everybody is learning and meeting each other, and they're seeing new things. It's almost like the Silk Road. And so to everyone from the box office to the usher staff to those meet and greet, they need to really have some experience in how to what one person thinks is polite may not be what someone else thinks is polite. So you really need to have some training, in being able to be accommodating and create that welcoming atmosphere.
Thank you so much. Please join us.
I actually have a feeling that my fellow attendees' comment is going to be more relevant to what we're talking about in the moment, so I'll give the floor to you first.
Bless your heart. My name's Robin Hickman, and I'm with the Ordway Center for Performing Arts in St. Paul, and I'm very fortunate to shepherd a commitment, an authentic engagement commitment called Taking Our Place Center Stage. Taking Our Place Center Stage. And so thank you for your comment, sister. we have seen that people have learned and walked with people in ways that they become allies to what we're talking about. And often those allies get the position before I can. So my point being, it's powerful and important to have the allies, but that's not a substitute for people who can bring the authentic walk, knowing, struggle, knowing. Because when we feel that, and I've been to many conversations where folks felt, I've learned it, I'm sensitive, I get them, I did a little time in the community agency, in the community, in the hood, and often they're the ones that are then prepared to do it. Now, can they be great allies? Yes, but that's not a substitute. When we talk about racial equity, if we're not talking economic equity, because that position is one less position that someone who has done the hard work, the mighty work, the heavy lifting. And if we talk about we want the diversity, then we've got to look at that's not a substitute for. It's with the folks that have the authentic experiences as you talked about. And so again, I'm saying, even in this industry, in this field, racial equity and economic equity, and then we'll be safe, because then sister can go home and have that job and support her family, doing what she's passionate and what she's paid the dues to be able to sit in her rightful place in the organization.
And may I just, before you leave the mic, may I just ask you to say a word or two about the Taking Our Place Center Stage work? Can you just share a few things to get folks knowing about it and where they can get more information about it, please?
Well, I have the flyers, but I have the nice brochures, and I'm proud of those brochures because those brochures are artists who also come to the Ordway because they know when they come to the Ordway, internationally renowned artists, they're going to do the real deal work. But this started because a foundation, which I wish we had time yesterday, the St. Paul Foundation knew the work of my company, Soul Touch Productions, the work of the Ordway, and they funded the marriage. They funded the marriage. Right now, the leading arts organizations in the Twin Cities, so the Walker, the Guthrie, the Ordway, the orchestra, everybody, the corporate funders are holding them accountable to be real about DEI. So Target, y'all gotta get it together. General Mills, y'all better get it together. And there's that economic piece for them because, there are reasons, the money piece. But when foundations say, we're serious and we will resource authenticity to happen, it can happen. I wish we had more time to talk about that, but thank you.
Yes,
But
thank you very much, and flyers, if anyone wants. So, two last comments from the audience to close out this panel.
Sure, very quickly. Again, my name is Casey Stratton. I'm the Director of Performing Arts at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Grand Rapids, but I also I'm a recording artist as well for the last 21 years, and I spent 3 years with Sony Classical as an artist. And I did find that sometimes organizational culture, those of us who are trying to be in the green, innovative side, will run up against someone who's so far on the red side that they won't embrace ideas if they aren't their own. I found a lot of ego. And I still find that. I've been so inspired by the people I've seen the last 2 days that seem to be in organizations where there is a lot of open dialogue, and I'm lucky to be part of one as well. But I've also been in experiences in my life, and I'm sure a lot of us have felt this, where you have someone above you who's just not going to move, not going to shift, they're not going to hear you. So how can we be effective in our organizational culture to try to move that around into the innovative zone when you are stuck in the control zone?
Thank you very much. Please.
So two Caseys in the house. I'm Casey O'Brien from Creative New Jersey, and very glad to be here with everyone. So building off of all of the comments that have just come through, lest we forget that it is only this June that the 2004 ban on gay marriage was overturned in this state. What are the processes in which we can affect policy for inclusion and for a lot of these issues that we're talking about? Because I feel like we're good about doing that in our organizations, and maybe our board is good at working with our staff and our audiences, but what can we do to change that outside of our own organizations as well? What steps can we take to influence the education of others beyond that?
Great. Not only organizations have cultures, but cities have cultures, states have cultures, and countries have culture. And if we want change, all of that needs to change. So thinking back on the discussion, thinking back on changing culture, not just dropping in strategy. Thinking about we want folks to go home and do something different, know something new. What do you want to leave us with? Mark?
It's a great conversation. I think there's been a lot of focus on staffing, and I'd encourage you to look at that as the first place where you can influence your culture. If there are opportunities for your staff to bring the authenticity, to bring the history, no one person has every perspective. So can you fill out your understanding by having people working side by side with you every day who can teach you things on a periodic basis without having to go to someplace, without having to go to a conference, without having to go to another city? Are there opportunities for you to build that within your organization?
Vince?
Again, the music hall, we look at the performing arts as a vehicle for change. So by having the diversity of all of these different programs, it's reflecting a cultural language and ideas and a cultural background that you can learn across the whole spectrum. And so that's reflected on the board, it's reflected in the staff. It's a place that everyone is welcome. It does not have a bias towards one type of programming over another, and it's evaluated over and over to make sure that we are using the performing arts as a vehicle to unite our many diversities.
Thank you. Sherry?
I would just like to leave you with the image or the analogy of the ensemble in music and thinking about an ensemble of bringing the strengths of all different kinds of people into the organization and being able to utilize and to sponsor and support, to coach and mentor all of the young people that are coming into your organizations to be able to learn and grow. So the ensemble takes all of the competing values together and makes one big whole, because the organization isn't going to work if they're all red, and it's certainly not going to work if they're all green. It's not going to work unless you take all of the colors together to make an ensemble.
Sherry, thank you. Horst, final thought.
It takes an assessment of what is currently in place, answering the question why. Why have we ended up where we are? And then expanding into what do we want our culture to be, and being very specific about what the difference between the now and then is, and then get to work to fill the void. So the gap analysis is really the way to go. And as far as methodology is concerned, my background being behavioral sciences and being passionate and hugely interested in how people show up that are truly effective, there is one thing I learned does not work, and I've failed many times trying that methodology, and that's proselytizing. You have to really engage in robust conversations and listen, much like what we're doing here. And I was strangely offended by that strong opinions that come in proselytizing manner would not hit the mark. But I had to learn that's just not a very effective way of going. So the robust conversation, eyeball to eyeball, beginning to understand each other on the fundamental level of our existence, and then speaking about current and desired, and then moving into that conversation, what is that gap? What does it mean? What does it not mean? And staying in that conversation. It's not a one-time round.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. We'll see you guys in 10 minutes for the final session before the dinner break. Please join me in thanking this panel for this conversation.